Also breaking tonight, are the Cleveland Indians ready to discuss changing the team's name? The team taking to social media tonight. Nick Camino joins us live now from the Camino Kitchen, of course. So, Nick, what's the team saying?
Hey, good evening, Laura. There's been rumblings about this for years. I mean, people have talked about this. The club has insinuated it before. Really, this has been talked about. But I really think that this all really started at the end of the 2018 season when the Indians finally phased out Chief Wahoo, the logo. After that, people started talking about the team name Indians. And now we kind of know in a statement tonight, even though they are still technically the Cleveland Indians, that's their team name. The club said in this statement that they are in the process of determining the best path forward when it comes to their team name. Now, there's certainly been a lot of pressure lately when it comes to racial equality and social justice. It's not even all that surprising when you think about this. Earlier today, the Washington Redskins announced they will undergo a thorough review of their nickname. So here's the statement. We had it for you. It was on the Indians' official Twitter account. In part, it reads, "Our organization fully recognizes our team name, and it is among the most visible ways in which we connect with the community. We've had ongoing discussions organizationally on these issues." So that's the end of their quote. Laura, since 1915, 105 years ago, that's when the Indians were called the Indians. This franchise dates back to the late 1800s, but they've been called the Indians since 1915. I know there's going to be people on both sides of the fence on this. There's going to be people that are in support of this. There's going to be people that are unhappy about this, but the main thing I think we can come away from with this is teams do change their names. And even the Cleveland Indians, before they were the Indians, changed their name. So I know for some people it might not sit well, but this has happened before.
Yeah, and you're right about the both sides. Even when they made that social media announcement, the comments were coming. Nick, thanks.
Yep, you got it.